So good afternoon, everybody. Welcome to our webinar. We're so pleased you could join us. So this webinar marks the 8th webinar in the It's a Science series. And this is brought to you by the UC Santa Barbara Alcohol and Drug Program. For those who don't know, we are part of student health. And just as this slide says, we provide counseling, education, prevention, and we also have a recovery arm of our program as well. And at this time, we are continuing to offer all our services online, meeting students wherever they are and whatever they're dealing with. So before we get into the webinar, we're just going to go over a couple quick housekeeping details here. Number one, this is going to be recorded, and for the sake of all of your privacy, and also so that you can refer to this in the future. And this webinar and all of our other webinars are going to be posted on our website, and you'll get that information at the end if you want to access that. If you do want to go ahead and ask any questions, please feel free to do so. And you can use the Q&A function. So I'm going to have some colleagues online today who'll be monitoring the chat, and they'll also be putting supplemental information in the chat as needed. So we'll kind of be fielding questions that way and also giving you some additional information. And if you're feeling brave, you can go ahead and raise your hand as well, and you can ask questions that way. So my name is Justin Sungot Smith. I am a behavioral health therapist. I work for the Alcohol and Drug Program, as well as student health. And in that capacity, I do individual counseling surrounding addictive behaviors, substance use, and a wide variety of other mental health concerns as well. I also do group counseling, and I do a lot of presentations such as this one, offering education to student, staff, and faculty, both on and off campus. So I'm really excited to be here today with all of you to be delving into this topic. And this actually marks my 3rd webinar I've done in this series, looking at the topic of electronics and how they impact us on a psychological, a behavioral, and an emotional level. And I've really done a lot of research in this area, and I find it really fascinating. And I wouldn't call myself an expert by any means. I would use the title of aficionado, if anything. And I've also actually, in addition to doing research, I've actually begun to develop a whole component of our counseling program that is designed to help students develop a more balanced relationship with electronics. So one of the topics we're going to be looking at today is one of the challenges we have to our sleep. And I know that this year has brought a lot of challenges to our sleep, but the topic we wanted to look at today was actually electronics and how that affects our sleep. So we're so honored to have our colleagues from Health and Wellness, Stella Rufeisen, who is a Health and Wellness intern, and Emily Teeter, who is an education specialist for Health and Wellness. And they're going to be joining me today to looking at this topic, kind of getting into the nitty-gritty of what it is about electronics that affect our sleep, and furthermore, looking at the potential that they have to be so addictive and how that actually influences our sleep. And we're also going to be engaging in some really cool group activities at the end of this, as well as they're going to be talking about an exciting thing that they are promoting known as the Sleep Challenge. And you'll hear more about that information in a little bit here. But let's get into it. So looking at in just what we'd hope you'd walk away from this presentation having gained, first and foremost, being able to understand the relationship that exists between electronics and sleep. Secondly, gaining more of an understanding surrounding why it is that electronics have the potential to be so addictive. And thirdly, allowing yourself to possibly gain some concrete skills or tips to develop more healthy bedtime routines surrounding the use of electronics, if that's something you're interested in doing. So I'm going to let Emily take it away with a nice icebreaker to start it off with.
Hi, everyone. Thanks, Justin, for the introduction.
Absolutely.
So to start off, we just wanted to get going in the chat, maybe some thoughts about what personally is your relationship with sleep. It doesn't have to be electronics related, but do you feel like you have an awesome relationship with sleep? You're like, I can fall asleep super quick, or, oh, it's kind of hard, especially on days that I'm stressed. So maybe throwing in the chat a little bit about what your relationship with sleep is like, or something that you're excited to learn about here. So I'm seeing some, struggle. It's like, it's hard. The relationship with sleep is difficult. It's hard when you're stressed. Yeah. Sleeping with their phone next to you. Falling asleep easily. Okay. Using sleep as a coping mechanism, loving sleep. So maybe having a really joyous relationship with that break, possibly a napper. Oh, and look at that. We got a shout out for the Aura app, which we'll explain a little bit more about that awesome meditation app later in the presentation. And Justin's just getting old, so it's all over the place, right? Okay, cool. Well, thanks so much for being here. We just kind of wanted to get a sense of what your relationship with sleep is like. Obviously, we all have different personal relationships. And I mean, kind of like what Justin's saying, it does change as you age, as you go through stressful times in school, not in school, and work, whatnot. So we'll dive more into a specific topic of a relationship with sleep that probably affects a lot of us, and that's the relationship with electronics.
So my name is Stella, like Justin said. I'm a health promotion intern. And so we're really just going to start off this presentation giving you some really quick basics on how electronics affects your sleep. And the primary way that it affects your sleep, according to the National Sleep Foundation, is that in the way it emits blue light. So we're finding that our circadian rhythm is particularly sensitive to light with short wavelengths. So this is kind of the light that our phones and screens emit, but also things like energy efficient light bulbs, if you want a fun fact. They both emit this artificial blue light, which has this short wavelength. So how does this affect our body? This affects our body because it delays the release of melatonin in our brains. And melatonin is a sleep-inducing hormone that just naturally increases in your body as the sun sets and light dims. So it's really important for getting you to feel sleepy and having like a smooth transition into sleep at the end of the day. And having your phone by your face emitting that blue light is going to inhibit that hormone from doing what it needs to do. A second way that electronics affect sleep, and Justin will touch a little bit more about the biology of this later on, which is super interesting, is just through stimulation, right? So if you're texting someone, if you're getting notifications, if you're scrolling on social media, if you're doing your homework on your computer, and electronics is meant to be like a stimulating activity, right? So when you're doing all these different activities, it doesn't really give your mind a chance to relax and register that it's sleepy. So it's a twofold way that electronics affects you, right? Like through this light and through the actual activities that you perform on your electronics. It makes it harder for your body to transition from this wake state to sleep.
All right, thank you for that, Stella. So this slide right here is pretty fascinating. It's taken from a survey done in the UK of the different kind of activities that people engage in with their phones in the middle of the night. And you can see here, 22% of us check the time, And 66% of us don't actually use their phone at all during the night, which is good. And then there's a wide variety of different activities that people engage in this survey. Checking instant messages, social media notifications, responding to messages, etc. So I think it's pretty evident here that the majority of us do actually engage with our phones in the middle of the night. And it seems pretty apparent that a lot of us do really know the relationship that exists between electronics and how they're not the best for our sleep. So this may beg the question, well, why do we continue to do it? And the reason is just in the same regard that your phone has been programmed, your behavior has also been programmed to a certain extent. So if you're somebody who finds yourself being really hard on yourself with regards to this specific behavior, I want you to let yourself off the hook a little bit, because there's a lot more than meets the eye when it comes to addictive processes. So when we look at addictive processes from a neurological standpoint, there's a whole host of different interactions occurring. And I could go on an entire webinar just on this topic alone, but for the sake of brevity, and also I don't want to bore you, I'm just going to hit on a couple key points here. So number one, this purple area of the brain you see is known as the limbic system. And the core function of the limbic system is to seek pleasurable experiences and avoid pain at all costs. So that is kind of our hardwiring, if you will, or our coding, to stick with the theme. So this really determines a lot of our unconscious behavior, and it's this very primitive part of our brain. So within the limbic system, there's this area called the reward circuitry. And the reward circuitry is essentially a series of different pathways through which different chemical messengers known as neurotransmitters transmit different pieces of information throughout the brain. So you may have heard of neurotransmitters. A big one is serotonin, also norepinephrine, and dopamine is another one. And dopamine is actually going to be the one that we're going to be focusing on for the purposes of this presentation. So dopamine is actually associated with feelings of pleasure, and it is what drives sensations of craving. So all of the different neurotransmitters do actually occur naturally in our brain. It's just the different activities that we engage in that either inhibit or enhance those. So when I'm talking about dopamine, what may be coming up immediately is substance use. And it's true that a lot of different substances do enact the production of dopamine. But there's also a wide variety of other different activities that do the same thing, such as eating food, watching sunset, having sex, drinking water, even engaging in screen use. So dopamine plays a big role in terms of the regulation of our emotions. So without dopamine in the picture, our mental health would be very poor, to say the least. When it comes to sleep, interestingly enough, dopamine actually also plays a role with regards to the fact that when we have a bunch of dopamine surging through our brain, it becomes very difficult to fall asleep. And our brain is in this state of arousal, and we become very alert. So in this sense, with regards to electronics, as Stella touched on, stimulating your brain in this way is not the best thing for your sleep, because it just produces these high amounts of dopamine that make you more awake. Dopamine also plays a role in terms of memory retention as well. And interestingly enough, dopamine is also stimulated when there's new or exciting information that's coming in. So this is one of the many reasons that social media is actually has the potential to be so addictive, is that there's this constant stream of new information coming in, And that can really make it enticing for you to keep engaging. And every time you're getting this stream of information, your brain is just lighting up, and it really keeps you engaged in the behavior repeatedly. So the issue being, there's actually some activities that produce such high amounts of dopamine in our brain that they overwhelm our rational brain. And we can't really think about the long-term consequences of the behavior we're engaging in, or the extent to which we're engaging in it. So this explains the long-studied phenomena of why some of us may have neglected our midterm paper for the third day in a row because we wanted to play Animal Crossing. And that's because Animal Crossing is not as rewarding. Doing a paper is not as rewarding as playing Animal Crossing. So just to break it down here, both these activities actually lead to producing dopamine in our brain. But playing a game or engaging in your electronics is a much more instantaneous supply of dopamine, and it seems that it is a bigger hit of dopamine. Whereas the dopamine that is produced from doing your paper comes from these conceptual breakthroughs you might have getting somewhere in your paper, or just finishing it and that feeling of accomplishment. So it's just, there's some very differences in terms of what we deem as rewarding. And this is why it is a little bit harder to give your paper that full attention, and your brain kind of just wants an instantaneous supply of dopamine. But I think it's important to look at that behavior in terms of the instantaneous supplies of dopamine are not always the best for us. So every time you get a notification, or you get an alert, or you get a message, or you get poked on Facebook by your distant relative who you met at a Christmas party one time, all those activities, they actually lead to the production of dopamine. And these little bits of dopamine actually in turn drive your behavior. And to a certain extent, this really operates outside of conscious awareness. So if you want to see a real life example of how this works, the next time you get a notification, notice how instantaneous your reaction to want to pick up your phone and look at that message is. And notice how it kind of occurs outside of certain aspect of intentionality. And I know it sounds kind of creepy to say, but to a certain extent, like I was saying before, this behavior is programmed. So your response to getting a notification, that desire to pick up your phone or check your phone, is something that's known as the Pavlovian response. In that, it is a conditioned response to a given stimulus. And who is doing the conditioning of our behavior? App developers and app designers and technology developers. And this is a very intentional effort to manipulate these more primitive parts of your brain to keep you using their products. So I think it's important to look at when you are falling into one of those loops. So one of the ways this is done is something that's known as the variable schedule rewards, or it's also known as intermittent reinforcement. And this is basically the idea of when you get a reward at a rate that is non-consistent, this produces these big surpluses of dopamine in the brain. This is exactly how a slot machine functions, in that you're not getting a reward, the reward being winning at a consistent rate. And in many ways, you can think of your phone as a mini slot machine with respect to, number one, the fact of you're scrolling very similarly how you would use a slot machine. Number two, I mean, if you look at the two side by side here, you can see some pretty big similarities. And there's a lot of parallels in that regard. I mean, just the general physical makeup, the colors, the bright lights. And by the way, those bright lights and colors, that is also intentional. That is a way of stimulating your dopamine. So to extrapolate on this point a little bit further, in terms of looking at social media, one of the other reasons why it's so addictive is that it is actually using a certain algorithm which is in accordance with the variable schedule reward. So when you post if you make a post and you're getting notifications, it is likely that you're actually getting more notifications all at once, but they deliver them to you in bursts. So you get these really big hits of dopamine in accordance with this algorithm. And also you're enticed to keep being drawn back to checking your phone. Who else liked my photo? Who else is commenting? So in that sense, it is very intentional. And it's really important, as I mentioned before, for us to be aware of the degree to which we're falling into these automatic patterns of behavior. So one of these loops is illustrated here. And I realize this is kind of a simplistic model, but I think it really provides a good depiction of the degree to which many of us are actually using our phones as emotional coping tools. And by the way, boredom counts as well. Now, I don't mean to suggest that you can't ever use your phone when you're bored, because I think it really has the potential for providing entertainment, for providing distraction when we're going through some rough times mentally. But I think you need to be cautious in continually using this as your sole means of emotionally coping. So whether it's substances, whether it's electronics, whether it's any kind of other addictive behavior, when you habitually turn to one thing and use that as your means of coping, that becomes problematic in respect to both developing dependence, in that you're tethered to this one thing, and also you're kind of teaching your brain that you don't really have the inner resolve or creative capacities to be able to handle dealing with these emotions. So in that, you are really telling your brain that you need whatever kind of emotional coping tool to deal with what's going on. So on that note, I would like to offer you some various tips if this is something you do want to work on. So number one, Stella kind of illustrated the extent to which blue light does impact sleep. So there's actually a nighttime mode on your phone, and this can be turned on very easily. I'm sure that Stella and Emily are going to touch on this later. And if they don't, you can find it on the web very easily. Number two, looking at the function in your phone called screen time. This is in iPhones, it's called screen time, and in Androids, I believe it's called digital well-being, just to be inclusive here. So this is a tool that I use a lot with students, and it gives them, number one, it allows them to build awareness surrounding tracking their use, and then also allows them to see the times when they may be resorting to using their phone more, and kind of allows them to reflect on what's going on in my life right now that I feel that I'm turning to this more to cope. Number three, if you can, I would advise you to try to avoid using your phone as alarm clock for a couple reasons. Number one, um, if you have your phone right by your bed, you're just going to reach for it either at night and you might start going on it and then impacting your sleep, or you might wake up in the morning and just go to it immediately, which so many of us do, let's face it. But I think it's really important to start developing some different routines around this. The other reason it's not such a good idea to use your phone at night is due to the fact that if you try to pick up your phone to check the time, which many of us do, as you saw from the slide before, that can become problematic because that can interrupt your sleep cycle and stimulate your brain. And we actually had somebody working at Health and Wellness who was a previous sleep therapist, and they really recommended against doing this. So just some food for thought there. Number four, thinking about in terms of looking at your notifications, which notifications do you actually need throughout the day? Do you really need to hear about how your Robinhood stock is doing every single day? I don't know. That's up to you. But just starting to have more consideration surrounding that. I know for myself, I turn off almost all my notifications, and it really helps me focus during the workday. Number 5, so there's actually a setting on your phone that exists. I'm not sure about Androids, but on an iPhone, you can actually turn your phone to black and white. All you do is hit the home button 3 times, and then your phone is black and white. So what that does is it makes your phone seem less alluring and attractive, and you won't be drawn to get distracted as much. Now we're going to be looking at some off-screen tips here. Oh, and by the way, I guess in the Android, it's called bedtime mode, just for your information. So yeah, we're going to be looking at some off-screen tips. Number 1, I would suggest, if you can, maybe just putting your phone out of sight to avoid being distracted by this. And I think this is a really good tip. I use this all the time when I'm working from home. And I just try to put my phone in another room sometimes, and it's really beneficial for me. Number 2, I touched on this a lot, just thinking about, the extent to which you're using your phone as a emotional coping device, and the degree to which that's happening, and reflecting on other behaviors you can engage in to deal with whatever's going on in your life. Number 3, starting to actually create segments of your day where you're not using your phones. I like to leave my phone at home, and I'll just go on a walk, go to the beach. Also, camping is a really good way to do this. I try to go an entire weekend where I'm not really using my phone, and it's so nice. I just come back and feel very rejuvenated. And I've suggested this to students, and they really find this is beneficial as well. The last thing I'd like to mention here is just thinking about starting to change the norms surrounding the idea that you always need to have your phone attached to you, and starting to really create a culture where it's acceptable to not have your phone glued at your hip. And, maybe going out with your friends at lunch and thinking about creating environments where you don't have your phones, or you're not using them at least. And I just want you to think on this point real quick here. How do you feel when other people are using their phones in front of you and ignoring you? And when you engage that behavior, how do you think that makes your friends feel? So just want to leave you with that, and whatever you choose to do with that is up to you. But I would invite you to try to change the norm if you can amongst your friends group, and gradually that's how it starts. So Stella has some more tips with you for you in a bit here.
All right. Thanks, Justin. So, I mean, as Justin explained, there's a lot of addictive processes and essentially app developers and companies that are working a little bit against our best intentions to limit screen time. And we've learned how, kind of detrimental this can be to falling asleep. So if we can't go cold turkey and get rid of the phone because we're maybe using it as a wind down activity before bed, we have some tips for you. And one of my favorite tips, it kind of overarching tip, is just try swapping an app. So if you find on your screen usage, like Justin explained, you can find out what you're spending a lot of time on. It may be a social media app, maybe email or whatnot. Try swapping an app before bed that doesn't suppress that melatonin and that wind down for the brain before bed. So we've listed some non-stimulating apps that can actually be helpful in inducing sleepiness before bedtime. So listening to a book can be really useful. You can put it on, a timer, 30 minutes or something like that, and you can actually set the phone down so you're not looking at it you're not seeing that blue light, but the book is just playing to you, and it can be nice to fall asleep to. There's an app like Audible, and as well as one called Overdrive that is through the public library system. I believe the app's actually called Libby, but you can find that on their website, overdrive.com. And that one's free for finding books to listen to. And just a side note with this, preferably something that's a little bit of a mindless book is good to listen to before bedtime. Not like a horror novel, something that would be stimulating to you, but maybe something a little more boring. I like Harry Potter because it's like, I've heard it so many times. I don't really have to pay attention that hard to the story. So number 2, meditation apps. Diane mentioned in the chat in the beginning that she's been using the Aura app before bed, and that's helping her fall asleep. So there's a lot of new sleep-specific meditations, kind of like these wind down meditations that you can listen to on a whole variety of apps out there. And one free app that's currently, you can get a 6-month subscription through the university for free is called Aura. And I believe the link to that is in the chat now, Aura Health app. So anyone at the university, staff, faculty, and students can get a free 6-month subscription to that. And they do have sleep-specific meditations. Same deal, you can play it, set it down away from you, and it'll just turn off, obviously, when it's done playing. And we also have some free recorded meditations on the Health and Wellness website. If you want to check those out, we do have a sleep-specific one there as well, in case you run out of your free 6-month subscription. Those will always live on our website. And one last note is try making a playlist of like some relaxing music that you could listen to before bed. So the National Sleep Foundation actually states that one of the reasons noises, kind of that stimulating noise, perhaps a disturbance from a roommate, can wake us up in the middle of the night is because our brain still continues to process sound as we're asleep. It's, you know, even though we're like in that deep sleep stage, we are still kind of aware of this sound in the room in case something, you know, does need to wake us up and there's a threat in the room and we need to respond to it. So we're still processing that as we sleep. But if you live with roommates, if you live in IB, there's a party going on, the bass is loud, that can be really disturbing for falling asleep and staying asleep. So white noise, nature sounds can be really helpful for inducing sleep and even getting through the night. So whether that's putting on some headphones, earpods, whatnot, they have like sleep specific little headphones that you can buy on Amazon, or you could just put it on speaker on your phone. That's really helpful for getting through and not being disturbed by noise.
Thank you, Emily. And yes, a shout out to the person in the chat. Those are amazing meditations. I love them too. Health and Wellness really has great free meditations. I cannot emphasize enough. Super helpful for beginners as well. So now we're going to do a little group activity. So while like looking through the literature on electronics, while researching the sleep challenge, I found this paper and I thought it was super, super interesting. So just to give you a basic rundown of this paper, basically the researchers conducted a 1-week social media intervention on a group of people that were considered social media addicts. And they found that it was successful on many fronts. Participants spent less time daily on social media, had increased self-esteem, you know, increased mental health scores, increased learning engagement, and, you know, the big kicker, increased sleep time compared to before they participated in the intervention. So we're not going to do the whole intervention today because it's very long. I do really encourage you to read up on the study because I think it's interesting and there's a lot of helpful tips within the intervention that you can look at closer on your own time. But I'm going to be doing an activity that's kind of inspired by the cognitive reconstruction approach that these researchers took, and hopefully it'll start to get you to think about your relationship with your phone a little bit differently, and maybe encourage you not to think of it as something that is always your choice, right? As Justin said, it's something that a lot of what keeps us on our phones are things that may not be in our awareness. So first, what we're just going to do is, if you have a piece of paper or your notes app open, just write a list of activities that you wish you had more time for every day. If you want to put them in the chat, I think that's cool too. Definitely to your own comfort level. Mine is physical activity. I always feel great after it, but I always feel like I never have enough time to do it. And then, as you write down the list of things that you wish you could do, maybe put like an estimate of how much time it will take, right? Like, so for me, physical activity, I think that'd probably take, an hour. So just take a couple minutes to do that. Feel free to put it in the chat. I think we'll see a lot of similarities maybe between the activities that we want to do. Some things that people have mentioned before have been learning to play the guitar, painting. Justin wants to brush up on his Spanish. Same, Justin. Yeah, awesome. Yeah, a lot of these are really great activities that hiking, that's a big one. I have never hiked in Santa Barbara, and I've wanted to since the day that I've come to college. So yes, yeah, thank you all for sharing. So yeah, just keep your list. Remember writing an estimate of how long you think it would take. And now what we're going to do is we're going to turn to our phones. So like Justin mentioned, all phones have kind of this screen time monitoring in the settings. It's a little bit different for Android and iPhone, but on iPhone it's screen time, on Android it's digital well-being. So if you just go in your settings and just look at your daily average time spent on your phone, right? So this is an example. I don't know who Jason is, but I found this picture, and Jason spends 3 hours and 14 minutes on his phone daily. So this is not to make you feel bad at all. Obviously, this is just to notice, right? To be curious about our own behaviors, because a lot of what we do when we interact with electronics, like Justin said, is something kind of more compulsive. We don't really think about what we're doing. So this is just a chance for us to reflect, oh, I spend 4 hours daily on my phone. I spend a lot on social networking or social media apps, or I spend a lot on Netflix. So as you go on your phone and you see how much time you spend on it, see how many of the activities that you wish you could do every day you could fit within that time, right? I'm not saying that we're trying to get that time down to zero, but personally, whenever I do this activity for myself and I'm looking at my screen time, I'm always how did I spend that much time on my phone and not realize, especially during breaks, for me, sometimes I'm 4 hours. I'm are you kidding? 4 hours? Where did that go? So it's just kind of reflecting on, is this something you really want to be doing, right? So for me, I really want to get in shape and exercise, because it helps reduce my anxiety. It helps me feel good about myself. It's healthy, it's just a great activity to have. And I never find time to do it. But then if I look at my phone, I'm well, do I have the time, or am I just, unconsciously spending time on something that I don't really want to, but that I'm getting sucked into? So I think personally for me, this activity is very empowering, because it lets you know that you have a lot of time that you can control. Your phone may be very addicting, but it's our choice ultimately to pick it up or put it down. And being aware of that is really a great first step. So that's kind of the goal of this activity. Hopefully y'all enjoyed it. And yeah, so that's kind of the end of our presentation. If you enjoyed this and you want to learn more, we have the sleep challenge coming up on Sunday, which is my baby. I love the sleep challenge. Emily and I spent a lot of time researching articles and just making it all in a digestible way for people to read about sleep. There's over 19 modules you can choose from. The pre-survey starts on Sunday, or opens on Sunday. So please, check out our website, register on Shoreline. You'll get a lot of important reminder emails about the challenge there. Anything you want to add, Emily, about the sleep challenge?
I guess 2 other interesting things. So if you do the whole 7 days of the challenge, it's just the pre-survey, post-survey, and then a module each day where you can learn about a variety of topics. I mean, some like you can learn more about electronics. You did learn a lot today, but you can learn about how food affects your sleep, how alcohol, caffeine, how sex and relationships, just all these things that interplay with our sleep. And like Stella said, we did a lot of, it's all backed by scientific articles, peer-reviewed research. So if you do the whole challenge, you can be eligible to win a prize, an Amazon gift card. And also something interesting, we're doing research for the first time on the challenge. We started actually last quarter for the first time. So we're trying to see the efficacy of the challenge, like our students and folks learning. And we've seen some really good results already, but you can opt into the research if you're interested in that type of thing as well.
And this slide just offers a little bit more about the Alcohol and Drug Program and what it is exactly we do. So all of our contact information is provided here, and also my contact information as well. So if you feel like you want to book an appointment to talk to any of the counselors about any mental health issues or substance use related, or if you want to book an appointment and talk about your electronic use with me, you can feel free to either contact our department or contact my direct email. I'm also happy to help you if you just want to have some questions answered. I'm always happy to be there for you. So I think this brings us to the end, and they have a little promotion here that Health and Wellness would like to do.
Yeah, so this is just, if you enjoyed this event and you'd like to see more from Health and Wellness, or if you've enjoyed any other programming you attended this quarter, please vote yes on gold. Voting is through April 19th and April 22nd, and this is just to reaffirm our department's lock-in committee. So everything that we presented on here, and the sleep challenges are all resources that Health and Wellness provides students, and the lock-in fee really helps our department getting these resources out to students that they can then access on our website at any time, like all those meditations. We also provide food resources for students that are food insecure. We have community meditations, one on social justice that actually was today at 11 a.m., mindfulness for social justice. We provide so many different resources for students, and we meet them where they're at and give a community for them to listen to. And so please vote yes. Woo.
And just to piggyback on that real quick, the student health, which the Alcohol and Drug Program is a part of, is also on this same ballot. And we have, in just as Health and Wellness does, we have a wide variety of different resources, including our department, and then also social work, psychiatry. So we have a very robust a range of different resources that we offer students, and we would greatly appreciate a vote as well. So before we go here, if y'all could be so kind as to take a quick survey. This really helps us understand how we're doing in terms of performance of these webinars, and gives us information as to where we can continue to improve. So if you have the time, we'd greatly appreciate it. And I think we're going to go ahead and answer some questions. I know there were some questions in the chat here. So I think the first question, let's see here.
So there was a bit from Gladys.
Yeah.
Addressing safety concerns or like coping skills.
Sure.
Of having the phone, kind of the need and the desire to have the phone around all the time, to be in the know,
right,
to be connected to current events.
Absolutely, yeah. So when I talk to students, I think this is a pretty prevalent concern for a lot of people. I've done a lot of research into looking at the news and the psychological impact of that. Number one, I can just tell you off the bat, as I'm sure you already know, that watching the news repeatedly and all the time, I think really contributes to depression and anxiety as well. So one thing I offer students around this idea is just the aspect of trying to be aware of how you feel before checking the news and then after the fact, and really bringing that conscientiousness surrounding how the news is actually impacting you. And doing so, I think, helps a lot of people realize that they're not really getting as much out of checking the news as they would like. So I think that's one of the biggest things I offer. In terms of just being in the know about current events, I mean, I think another big thing that comes up is this aspect of FOMO. And I hear that time and time again with students. And I think it's important to just look at the fear that you're experiencing in missing out and where that is coming from. And I realize this is more of a, it takes more of an in-depth psychological introspective approach, but just looking at the realisticness of that fear and, the idea of, okay, if I miss out on this one event, what is that really going to mean for my life? And are my friends going to all hate me if I miss this one event, or what exactly is going on there, and kind of unpacking that fear, if you will. And also being able to look at, okay, so if that did happen, what would be so bad about that? So that's how you kind of begin to look at that, I would say. Does that kind of answer your question a little bit, Gladys, if you're still there? Okay, fantastic. And I'm happy to talk to you more about that if you want at all. Please feel free to go ahead and email me and we can set up a meeting. Any more questions at all for anybody? We got 10 minutes left, so. Or for Stella or Emily as well.
Yeah, I think there's one more
Okay,
question.
okay.
Is it bad or unhealthy to not sleep at night and sleep during the day? What about reading off the computer at night, even with night mode on?
Can I take the computer one?
Yeah.
I think that's a great point. And also just a reminder for everyone to not only put night mode on your phone, but also your computer, especially during these Zoom days when we're working and doing homework. So I think that, going on your computer and doing homework, that's a stimulating activity, right? And I'm a student, I totally get it. Sometimes the only time you have to do work is right before you go to bed. But I do really encourage that if you find yourself, if it's impeding your sleep, right? Because everyone is different. So some people may only need like a 10-minute, distance from when they're doing their homework to go to bed, but some people may need a little bit longer. So if you find this affecting your sleep, I would really recommend trying, to separate when you close your computer and when you go to bed by like 30 minutes, maybe an hour, and implementing instead a kind of bedtime routine. And the sleep challenge has a module on this and just has like a list of activities you can do before bed instead of just like doing homework to the last minute or going on Facebook or watching Netflix. There are things like, taking a warm shower, right? Taking a warm shower helps promote drowsiness. Stretching, doing a meditation, and we list more on the Health and Wellness website under the bedtime modules. But just kind of implementing a routine that allows both your mind and your body to relax before bed, I think would be a really great habit to start to get into. Even something like brushing your teeth and like your skincare routine. I think Emily and I did a workshop the other day, and someone was saying that their skincare routine is kind of like their own little bedtime routine before bed. And I think that's great, just whatever works for you, and something that isn't stimulating, I think would be great to just add in between, when you finish that last, page of reading and before you go to bed. Does that answer that part of your question? I know there's a second part. Emily, do you want to take that?
Yeah, thank you for answering especially from the student perspective. Stella knows, what that's like to need to write the paper at night. So I love what she said. I think one more tip there that I thought of is, if you can, I know there's a lot of like where we're all working from home, we're studying from home. If you can just separate your bed from studying, reserve your bed for sleep and sex only is what we recommend. Not eating, not doing homework, and especially writing a paper before bed, because there's just no separation for your mind and your body in those moments. If you're on your laptop, shut the laptop and then just try to go to bed. It's really hard. So I think that answers that part. And then the other section was about, is it unhealthy to sleep at night, to not sleep at night, and then to sleep during the day? And it's hard for me to answer like whether it's unhealthy or not. I mean, if you're getting 8 hours of sleep for your body, that's really healthy. But I think right here, it's a function of how you're interacting with society and with your life. Unfortunately, our kind of world is set up for this 9 to 5 type of lifestyle. And some of us are more naturally night owls, and some of us are more naturally early birds. And that's kind of just a biology thing that is baked into us. But we do have to show up for things that happen during the day, often, especially as students or employees of the university. So I wouldn't, it's hard to answer the unhealthiness. I think it's more when it starts to inhibit your interaction with the daily activities that you kind of need to be engaged in. That's when it can be unhelpful.
Yeah, thank you for fielding those questions there. Yeah, so I think this brings us to the end. Oh, we got one more here.
Yeah, so
Oh.
Jesus, for about like reading school related books, so these are just kind of, guidelines from research. And I always like to say, like, this is not meant to like scare you or make you anxious. Like, if you have a routine that's working for you and you're going to bed 8 hours a night every day, you don't have trouble going to bed, and you find that, reading that school book is relaxing for you, then that's great. I'm not going to sit here and be like, that's horrible, don't do that, because it's working for you. And I think it's really important just to like reflect on your own, how you react to things, right? Like, for example, I feel like I can do stimulating things closer to bed when I'm really relaxed. But this week I've had like a lot of stuff and I've been really stressed, and I've kind of noticed that like, oh, even though I left some time between finishing my homework and going to bed, I'm still having trouble sleeping. Like, tomorrow I'll add some more bedtime routine activities in between them. So it's really about yourself and your own preferences. These are just kind of guidelines to help people who are having trouble sleeping and want to know the right path to take to try and get better. Because I think that sometimes when we're, sleepy and we can't sleep, it's a horrible situation. We are like, sleep is so close, we can't grab it. And these are just to help you when you're kind of in those moments of struggle and you don't really know what to do. So just keep reflecting, I would say. I would, like, if it works for you, definitely do it. It's each to their own. We all sleep differently.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. And I guess just one more plug for the sleep challenge in that way. So that's kind of why we created this whole variety of 19 different modules, so students can choose to read about the science behind things that interest them. Like, what personally affects my sleep? Oh, it's caffeine. Then I'm going to read about that module. But if you don't drink coffee, there's no sense in maybe learning about how to limit your coffee intake. So yeah, just assessing what your personal relationship with electronics, with sleep, what's affecting your life, and then maybe trying to just be curious about how you can make some habit changes if it is affecting your sleep.
Fantastic. Thank you so much for all of that great information. So thanks y'all for joining. We really, really appreciate you coming to us today, and please tune in to our future It's a Science webinars, and then also possibly more sleep challenge webinars to come. We'll keep you posted on that one. Hope you all have a great day and a great weekend.
Thank you.